Hello class, this is Kelly Neal, and today we're going to talk about a brief overview of anatomy and physiology of your heart. Your heart is actually located in the center of your chest. It's tilted a little anteriorly and a little bit to the left, so the biggest bulk of your ventricles comes to the left side of that sternum. You have the apex of the heart, which is where the apex of the heart is where the ventricles come together, and the base of the heart is here where the great vessels actually come into the heart muscle. Your heart is a hollow organ. It's about the size of an adult fist, and it weighs just a little less than a pound. Now, when we look at structures of our heart, we'll look at the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava, and those both come into the right atrium. Now, here between the right atrium and here's the right ventricle, we have the tricuspid valve, and between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery, we have the pulmonic valve. Now, those are structures on the right side of the heart. On the left side of the heart, we have on our left side of the heart, we have 4 pulmonary veins. We have 2 on the left side and 2 on the right side, though they all empty into the left atrium. Between the left atrium and the left ventricle, we have the mitral valve, also known as a bicuspid valve. And then between the left ventricle and the aorta, we have the aortic valve. Now, a couple other structures to look at here is these here are called chordae tendineae, and these are thick ropey-like tendons which actually help anchor the valves in place, and those are attached to papillary muscles, which are in the endocardial layer of the heart. They're just kind of like these folds of muscle that pop up, and that's where the chordae tendineae are attached to. When we look at surfaces of the heart, this picture is taken from a side view of the heart. This right here is the sternum. This would be the spine, and so I'm looking at the heart coming into that view. This area right here is the anterior surface of the heart, and this is made up of the right atrium and the right ventricles. This section here is the inferior surface, also known as a diaphragmatic surface, but usually referred to as the inferior surface of the heart, and that's part of the right ventricle, and a good portion of the left ventricle is here. And then the back part of the heart is our posterior surface, and this is usually made where the left atrium and the pulmonary veins enter into the heart. When we look at layers of the heart, our innermost layer, the inside layer of the heart, is called the endocardium. Now, when we're looking at the endocardium, it is made of smooth, it's smooth tissue, it's smooth epithelial and connective tissue. And I say smooth, it's smooth to touch, but there's lots of valleys and folds inside of it. Then comes the myocardial layer, and the myocardial layer is this muscle layer of the heart, and you'll notice on the right side the myocardial layer is much thinner than on the left side of the myocardium. The left side, the myocardial layer, is about 2 to 3 times thicker than the right side because it has to pump against more resistance to send blood to the entire body. Then we have the epicardial layer, the outer layer of the heart. Now, the epicardium is where blood vessels, where our coronary arteries, where nerve intervention is, and then there's also a layer of fat here. You don't even have to be overweight, but everyone has some fat layer here on this just for warmth and protection. Then surrounding this heart muscle, we have the pericardium. And the pericardium it's considered a double-walled sac, and one layer of it is the epicardium, and then we have this other layer, the pericardial layer, and that pericardial layer is kind of a thick connective tissue, and it helps hold and anchor the heart in place. Now, in between those two layers, we refer to that as the pericardial space, and we have pericardial fluid in that space, usually between 30 and 50 milliliters of fluid, and that helps lubricate and protect those two layers so they don't rub together. When we look at blood flow through the heart, our blood flow comes in from the superior and the inferior vena cava, and that all dumps into the right atrium. Now, this is considered unoxygenated blood. It will then go through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle, and then it'll go through the pulmonic valve into the pulmonary artery and over to the lungs. Now, when it goes over to the lungs, it's going to exchange over in the lungs. Our oxygen and CO2 levels will exchange. And then we're going to have fresh, rich, oxygenated blood coming back into the left side of the heart. So that will come in through those 4 pulmonary veins, the 2 here on the left, the 2 over here on the right, and we said they all dump into the left atrium. Then it will come through the mitral valve and into the left ventricle. Now, from the left ventricle, it's going to go out the aortic valve, through the aorta, and to the entire body. So your right side of the heart deals with unoxygenated blood, and the left side of the heart deals with oxygenated blood. Even though your atria, the right and left atria, are contracting and relaxing at the same time, and your ventricles, your right and left ventricles, are contracting and relaxing at the same time, the right side of the heart is dealing with unoxygenated blood, and the left side of the heart is dealing with oxygenated blood. I also want to take a look at our valves. Now, the whole purpose of the valves, we've been talking about that tricuspid and mitral and the aortic and the pulmonic. The whole purpose of your valves are to allow one directional blood flow, to keep blood going in the right direction. So our atrioventricular valves are that tricuspid and mitral. They're separating the atria from the ventricles. Our semilunar valves are the aortic and the pulmonic. Okay, pulmonic here, aortic here, and that's separating the ventricles from those great vessels. So the whole purpose, we said, of the valves is for one directional blood flow. But when you're listening with a stethoscope and you're listening to those heart sounds, your heart sounds are actually made by the closure of the valves. So your tricuspid and mitral valves, when they close, that makes the first heart sound. And when your pulmonic and aortic close, that makes your second sound. Now, this next picture here is another picture of the valves, and this is actually where it's just cut off the top of the atria, and we're looking down at the valves. And you'll notice the tricuspid on the right, the mitral on the left, the aortic valve, and the pulmonic valve. Now, all of these valves have 3 leaflets to it except this mitral valve, and that is why the mitral valve is also known as a bicuspid valve, because it only has 2 leaflets to it. When the tricuspid and mitral valves are closed, the pulmonic and aortic will open. And when the pulmonic and aortic close, then the tricuspid and the mitral will be open. Our coronary arteries are what actually feed the heart muscle. And you would think of all of that blood going through the heart muscle, that the heart would take its blood supply out. But your heart muscle actually gets its blood supply from the coronary arteries, which wrap around the outside of the heart muscle. Those coronary arteries are located in that in the epicardial layer of the heart. Now, the coronary arteries, you have a right coronary artery, which feeds most of the right side of the heart. And the left coronary artery, it's the left main that comes off of the aorta, and then it bifurcates down the left anterior descending, which will feed most of your ventricle, and the circumflex, which will feed the back of the heart. Now, these coronary arteries are actually attached to the aorta, to the base of the aorta, and they actually fill, your coronary arteries actually fill with blood during the diastolic phase of the heart, when the heart's in its relaxation phase. You also have coronary veins, which parallel those arteries. So the oxygenated blood goes to the coronary arteries, and then the unoxygenated blood will come back to the heart through the veins. And the veins all dump back into what we call the coronary sinus, which will actually dump back into the right atrium with the rest of the unoxygenated blood. The cardiac cycle is important. The cardiac cycle is our systolic and our diastolic phase of our heart. Now, you actually have a systolic phase and a diastolic phase of the atria, and a systolic and a diastolic phase of the ventricles. But usually when people are referring to systole and diastole, they're really referring to the ventricles, because that's the largest muscle mass of your heart. So the systolic phase here is when the ventricles are contracting. So the right side of the heart is taking that unoxygenated blood and pumping it over to the lungs, and the left side of the heart is contracting, and it's pumping it from the left side of the heart down out the aorta to the entire body. So systole is the contraction phase. During the diastolic phase, the ventricles are at rest and they're filling up with blood. But this, we said, is actually when the coronary arteries are filling with blood as well to feed the heart muscle. Now, cardiac output is kind of an important concept to understand because our cardiac output, it's going to play when we talk about what happens when a person has a fast heart rate or a slow heart rate. A lot of it's going to come out to, are they symptomatic? Is their cardiac output impacted by it? So we'll be referring to this quite a bit. And what our cardiac output is how much blood our heart is pumping out every minute. So every minute, how much blood does your heart pump out? Now that is going to be dependent on stroke volume, how much your blood sends out with every beat. So every time your heart contracts, how much blood goes out with each beat times your heart rate. And that's going to give us our cardiac output. Now, our stroke volume is impacted by three things: preload, contractility, and afterload. Preload, think of it as filling. Okay, how much blood is coming back in that diastolic phase to fill your heart? So if your ventricles are filling up well, the myocardial fibers are going to stretch. So hopefully they'll be able to come back and contract. So you have to have good filling to be able to stretch those fibers. Then we have to have contractility. Once those myocardial fibers are stretched, they need to come back and forcefully contract to push the blood to where it needs to go. And so that is going to impact our stroke volume. And then afterload, I kind of think of afterload as part of that's going to depend on ventricular size and the thickness of the wall, but it also depends on how much resistance the heart has to pump against. How much resistance does that heart have to pump against to get blood everywhere? So those three things are going to make our stroke volume. How much blood we pump out with each beat, multiply that by our heart rate, that's going to give us our cardiac output, how much blood we have putting out every minute. Now we have certain properties to our cardiac cells. We have automaticity, excitability, conductivity, and contractility. And automaticity means that your cardiac cells can actually initiate their own impulse. You don't have to tell your heart, okay, you need to beat now. Okay, you need to beat now. Your heart will automatically do that for you. It will automatically generate an electrical impulse to send through the heart muscle. Then our heart has excitability. It can respond to outside stimulus. You have nerve intervention that comes to your heart muscle. And when you get excited, when you get nervous, when you're scared, nerve stimulation can cause some excitement to the heart and cause it to respond. And then we have conductivity. We have the ability of those cardiac cells to receive that electrical stimulus and conduct it to the next cell. So that automaticity that starts the heartbeat, it can spread and transfer to each cell of the heart so the entire heart can get the message. Then we have contractility, the ability of the cardiac cells to actually shorten to cause muscular contraction. Now, when we look at ECG paper, that will tell us if we have automaticity, it will tell us if we have excitability, it will tell us if we have conductivity. But the only way we can tell if we have contractility is to actually go check our patient, to actually check a pulse, to check a blood pressure, to see how we're doing with our patient. So this is where we're going to stop with our first introduction, and we will continue with the next video.